Tonight on Bridge City News, extreme cold warnings are in effect as Old Man Winter has his grip on the prairies once again. Politicians gathered in Edmonton to speak about how the Iranian plane crash has impacted so many Canadian families. And post-traumatic stress disorder, we hear how it impacts the lives of many in our military. Today we hear from a Lethbridge veteran who struggles with it on a daily basis.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Many southern Albertans woke up to some very cold temperatures today. Extreme cold warnings were in effect for much of Western Canada. Environment Canada says a multi-day episode of cold wind chills continues in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and many parts of British Columbia and the Yukon. Officials say some areas will see wind chill values near -40 in the southern regions and as cold as -50 up north. The frigid temperatures are expected to last throughout the week. Jeanette Rocher will have a complete look at the weather forecast coming up later in our show. With sub-zero temperatures, the risk of frostbite increases. Paramedics often see increased calls when the weather gets this cold, especially from those most vulnerable, including seniors and children. Now, there are ways you can protect yourself from getting frostbite. According to medical professionals, you should limit the time you spend outdoors in the cold, wet, or windy weather. Dress in several layers of loose, warm clothing. Wear mittens rather than gloves. Also wear warm socks and sock liners that provide insulation. Also be sure to watch for the warning signs of frostbite, which may include a prickly feeling, numbness, also red, white, or bluish-white skin, or even hard, waxy-looking skin. Clumsiness due to joint and muscle stiffness, and in severe cases, blistering after rewarming. More information on how to treat frostbite can be found on the Alberta Health Services website. A memorial was set up at the University of Alberta where thousands gathered to mourn the victims of a Ukrainian jetliner shot down in Iran. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says it has been gut-wrenching to listen to stories from relatives of the 57 Canadians who were killed. In total, 176 people died when an Iranian missile brought down Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 752.
I had a chance to meet with some families over the course of the past few days. And to be perfectly honest with you, I wish I could adequately share with you what I was privileged to hear. Sitting with these families while they talked about their loved ones, learning who they were, what they loved to do, what their plans were for the future, was gut-wrenching. All Canadians were heartbroken to hear that Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 752 had crashed. All Canadians were shocked and outraged to learn that it had been brought down by an Iranian missile. This tragedy struck our Iranian-Canadian community, leaving cities like Edmonton reeling. But this was truly a Canadian tragedy.
Trudeau says he learned many of the victims came to Canada in search of new opportunities for their families and are now consumed by grief and outrage. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney sat beside Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the memorial in Edmonton. Kenney says the people on the jet were victims of human failure to resolve conflicts without violence.
Whether their lives were taken by incompetence, by accident, or by design, we know that everyone on board that plane were victims of a chain of actions rooted in the all-too-human failure to resolve conflicts peacefully.
Iran has admitted the plane was mistaken for a hostile target amid soaring tensions with the United States. 8 Canadian specialists traveled to Iran today to join 3 members of Canada's Standing Rapid Deployment Team at a base of operations in the wake of the shooting down of the Ukrainian passenger jet. They include 2 experts from the Transportation Safety Board. The TSB also plans to deploy a second team of investigators who specialize in aircraft recorder download and analysis. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has demanded that Canada be fully involved in the investigation, including gaining access to the plane's black boxes. Maple Leaf Foods CEO Michael McCain has sent out a series of tweets criticizing the United States government for the Iranian missile strike that brought down the Ukrainian jet, killing 176 people. The victims included a company's employee's wife and her 11-year-old son. McCain is livid and says he feels that a, quote, narcissist in Washington destabilized the region. A businessman in Toronto is spearheading a fundraising campaign to help those who lost loved ones in the Iran plane crash. The founder of Paramount Fine Foods, Mohammed Faqih, says he would like to raise around $1.5 million to help cover funeral costs for the victims.
I'm calling on all of us Canadians in this moment of need, including, importantly, corporate leaders and businesses across the country, to support these families with the unexpected expenses that have tragically fallen upon them. I know that this community, the Iranian community, and a lot of communities are sometimes very proud to accept, especially financial help. But you're not accepting any help from strangers. We are one family, one big family, a Canadian family.
A campaign dubbed Canada Strong will be overseen by a charitable fund that also raised money for the victims of the Toronto van attack. Iranian police and security forces fired both live ammunition and tear gas to disperse demonstrators protesting Iran's initial denial that it shot down the Ukrainian jetliner, which killed 176 people. Iran says the plane was shot down due to human error. The Canadian government has called for a credible investigation into the shooting down of Flight 752 in Tehran, Iran. It is Monday. That means Lethbridge City Council met again today, their first meeting of 2020. There were some important items on today's agenda, including the announcement of an interim city manager who's been appointed. Jody Melly takes over from Bram Strain, who resigned due to personal reasons. Today was his last day. Melly has more than 35 years of experience in municipal government. Melly will serve as interim city manager until council announces a permanent replacement in late spring or early summer of this year.
I'm quite honored that City Council has confidence in me that I can take on this role. It is pretty significant, and I'm happy that they've chosen me. Very familiar with the workings of the organization, very familiar with some of the challenges that we face, and so looking forward to keeping things moving in the right direction.
With the addition of our security model, our new security model, so we've always had security, and we've really looked at how that security works, what they do in the library, their procedures, and what we see is an ability to deal with concerns as they arise by adding the security. Again, the public library is open to everybody. There's always going to be a diverse clientele in the library, and but we do have standards of behavior. So those guards are really there to ensure that those standards of behavior are upheld and again allow us to deal with incidents as they arise.
Lethbridge police have charged a Calgary man with drug trafficking and seized more than $50,000 worth of drugs. Police say the bust occurred on January 11th when they responded to a report of a break-and-enter at a Northside home around 1 a.m. 23-year-old Alexander Timothy Kulach faces a wide range of charges, including drug trafficking, possession of stolen property, carrying a concealed weapon, and resisting a peace officer. Kulach will appear in court on Thursday. Police in Calgary are investigating a suspicious death after they responded to a shooting over the weekend. EMS were called to a home in the city's east side yesterday where they found a person in critical condition. The victim was declared dead a short time later. One man was arrested at the scene. Police say it was not random and that the people involved knew each other. A woman who was wanted on a Canada-wide warrant for a homicide in Saskatoon last month has been arrested. 35-year-old Winston Little Crow died December 7th from injuries that followed a reported shooting. 21-year-old Aaron Ashley Straightnose was arrested by Saskatoon Police's gang unit and is charged with first-degree murder. The 17-year-old male is also charged with first-degree murder in the case. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition that has impacted many in Canada, including our emergency responders and veterans. Vance McGrath is a retired warrant officer who served with the Canadian Armed Forces for close to 3 decades. Vance suffers from PTSD. He says he was diagnosed after returning from his tour in Afghanistan. He says it hit him really hard during a time when he went on holidays with his family.
We were in Disneyland, walking around. We were up at, going by one of the food courts, one of the many ethnic ones, I don't know which one, but there was a certain smell that came across there that hit me, and right away, it was the same thing. Like I just froze in my tracks. Basically, I went right white. The blood drained from my face. Again, same thing, started sweating and got into a real panicky mood. And my daughter didn't know what was going on, and I said, we got to get out of here now.
Watch the full interview with retired warrant officer Vance McGrath talking about his challenges coping with PTSD coming up in the second half of our show. There are many people in our country who love our healthcare system and want to leave it just the way it is. Now, there are others, however, who believe that we should also have private healthcare when it comes to alleviating wait times. You can include Derek Fromm in that group. Derek is a lawyer with the Constitution Foundation. He says private health care should be a fundamental right of all Canadians.
access to a waiting list is not access to health care. And it's a very important distinction. Just because the government has surgical facilities and can do the surgical procedures for you in their facility doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it in a timely and effective way that will preserve your health. And if your health is at risk and you're suffering, it becomes a constitutional violation when the government doesn't allow you to solve your own medical problems.
Catch the full interview with Derek Fromm from the Constitution Foundation discussing private versus public health care coming up in the second half of our show. When June 27th rolls around, the Federal Conservative Party will have a new leader. Today, the leadership race officially got underway. Some of the names being bantered about include former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, along with former Harper cabinet ministers Rona Ambrose and Peter MacKay. Candidates have just over 2 months to raise $300,000 and get 3,000 signatures in order to have their names on the ballot. The contest unofficially began in the middle of last month when Andrew Scheer announced he would step aside as soon as a replacement was chosen. South of the border, residents in Pickens County, Alabama, returned to see the damage left by a weekend tornado. The National Weather Service said a tornado packing winds of around 180 kilometers an hour hit Saturday, killing at least 3 people.
This is somewhere where we used to go for Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's just like any big holiday, we just come here and gather. So it's like to see all of this gone, it was like very emotional. Not only my family, but this is something that would bring, and it has brought the community closer together.
It was just unexpected. We didn't expect to come down here and see this. Whatever we can find, we're just trying to save memories, pretty much. That trailer was gone. The house was like this. My husband was screaming for his sister, Angela. He was going ballistic, hollering, screaming, Angela, Angela, Angela. What's important was remain standing. Our family remains standing. Buildings can be replaced.
Meanwhile, an EF2 tornado with winds of around 180 kilometers an hour struck Kershaw County in South Carolina Saturday night, doing extensive damage to many buildings, including a high school. The path was around 1 kilometer long. Outside of damaged buildings, many trees were uprooted and vehicles were also damaged. Fortunately, there were no deaths or injuries. But so far this year, storms have claimed 11 lives in the U.S. Midwest and southern states. Black smoke could be seen spewing from a Philippine volcano earlier today. A sudden eruption of ash and steam forced thousands of villagers to flee and shut down Manila's international airport, forcing the cancellation of around 500 flights. Offices and schools were also closed. Clouds of ash blew more than 100 kilometers north of the volcano. Officials in Australia's New South Wales say they have been delivering thousands of kilograms of carrots and sweet potatoes to the endangered wallabies in wildfire-stricken regions of the country. The veggies were being dropped to help the endangered brush-tailed rock wallaby in the national park, which has lost a lot of its food source with the recent wildfires. The colder weather has made its way here, but how long will it be sticking around? Jeanette Rocher will have a complete look at the weather picture coming up in just a moment. Hopefully your block heater is working. The colder temperatures have arrived. Will they be sticking around, long-term or short-term? Jeanette Rocher has a look at the 7-day forecast along with the national temperatures.
Yeah, you better have those block heaters is right, Hal, because winter has arrived with a capital W. Look at these temperatures. The overnight low tonight is -29, and the high tomorrow is -26. The low tomorrow is -31. We're going to see a chance of flurries tomorrow as well. And then for the 5-day forecast ahead of us, not going to get much better, I hate to tell you, until the weekend at least. -22 will be the high on Wednesday, -28 the high on Thursday, and then climbing to about -22 on Friday. And then climbing still again on Saturday and Sunday. The high on Saturday, -7, and a 0-degree high for Sunday, and mostly sunny week coming up for the rest of the week as well. The average highs and lows, according to the almanac, should be around -2, -14 the low. We're obviously getting way lower than that right now. The highest temperature on this day was 12 degrees. It was in 1943, and the lowest temperature was -39. That was in 2005. Let's hope we get nowhere near there. The sun rose today at 8:25 a.m. and it set this evening at 4:55 p.m. We had about a minute longer of daylight than we did yesterday. Looking over to the west coast, we're going to see snow in Victoria and Vancouver, -2 in Victoria, -5 in Vancouver. Edmonton's high, minus 27 tomorrow, minus 28 will be the high in Calgary. A little bit of sunshine though in Alberta. Saskatoon's going to see a sunny day tomorrow, but minus 28 will be their high. Minus 26 will be the high in Regina tomorrow. And Winnipeg will be looking at a minus 12 degree day with a chance of flurries as well. Looking over to the east, Toronto will see a nice plus day, 4 degrees, chance of showers actually. Ottawa and Montreal will see a mix of sun and cloud. Minus 7 is expected in Ottawa, and Montreal's high tomorrow will be minus 8. Looking into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton's high will be minus 4. We'll see a 0 degree high in Halifax, chance of flurries there. Snowing tomorrow in Charlottetown, high of minus 4. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, they'll be looking at a minus 8 day with periods of sun and cloud. That's your forecast.
Brand Energy Solutions and its 250 employees ratified a new contract today in Edmonton. The new collective agreement will provide workers with a 1.2% increase to their base wage rates while maintaining 4% employer contributions to both their pension plans and employee RSPs. Brand Energy Solutions provides a broad range of services, including scaffolding, fireproofing, and asset management to a wide range of commercial and industrial markets across the province. The Business Outlook survey launched by the Bank of Canada says business confidence in our country has edged a little bit higher. There were, however, mixed signals about the labour market. The survey, which is based on interviews with senior managers from 100 firms, says outside of energy-producing provinces, there are reports of improved indicators of future sales. The Consumer Expectations Report finds that Canadians see both an increased chance that they will leave their job voluntarily during the next year and an increased chance that they'll lose their job sometime this year. The new mid-engine Chevrolet Corvette has been named North America's Car of the Year. Kia took the SUV award, and Jeep Gladiator wins for Truck of the Year.
The jury panel for this award is vast, expert, deeply experienced, and so winning, a consensus from that group for Car of the Year is really, really important to us and really powerful validation of what we've been doing.
And the winner is the Kia Telluride.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the NACTOY jurors. I think as we heard from such an experienced and knowledgeable group of people, this is a true accolade that anyone would be proud to receive. It really does round out an amazing 12 months since we launched the Kia Telluride at last year's Super Bowl.
The winner of the 2020 North American Truck of the Year is the Jeep Gladiator.
The North American Truck of the Year means a lot to us here at Jeep, and I really thank you. I know when you look at it, it's really the top guns of the automotive journalists that have voted this as Truck of the Year, so thank you very much to everybody that voted for Jeep. Really appreciate it.
Some nice looking vehicles. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up almost 59 points on the day to 17,293. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 83 points on the day to 28,907. The S&P 500 was up almost 23 points to 3288, and the Nasdaq was up 95 points to 9273. Oil was down 96 cents to 58.08 per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $2.18. Gold was up 56 cents to $15.4845 an ounce. Silver was even on the day at $17.96 an ounce. Wheat is at $229 per metric ton, barley's at $232, canola's at $469, and corn is at $282 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 88 cents to $127.40. Feeder cattle were down $1.58 to $147.25. Lean hogs were down $1.35 to $67.05. The Canadian dollar was unchanged at 76.59 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, extreme cold weather warnings were issued earlier today by Environment Canada for much of Western Canada. Regions of the north dropping to below -50, and in the south as low as -40 with a wind chill. Here in Lethbridge, we hovered around -25 with the light snow. The overnight low should hit -30 with the cold temperatures. Will be sticking around for the next week, so make sure you bundle up. Many of our veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, including a Lethbridge veteran who served 3 decades in places like Bosnia and Afghanistan. Hear the powerful interview with Vance McGrath coming up next. But first, Here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Troyanda Ukrainian Dance Club is celebrating Ukrainian New Year's Saturday, January 18th at the German Canadian Club. The festivities will feature a special performance by the Troyanda Dance Club, followed by a Ukrainian dinner with pierogies, sausage, cabbage rolls, and more. Plus, live music by Ukrainian band Absolute. The evening also includes a silent auction, raffles, games, and a midnight lunch. Tickets are $55 and can be purchased by calling Donna at 403-315-3492. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or email Lethbridge Legal Guidance at telus.net. Easy Does It is an Al-Anon support group for adult children of alcoholics. Get an opportunity to share about your experiences with those who understand and learn healthy coping skills for your relationships. This group meets Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Good Shepherd. For details, call Judy at 403-329-0661. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
In Canada, it is estimated that up to 10% of our war veterans, including peacekeeping forces, will go on to experience a chronic condition known as post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Joining me now in studio is Vance McGrath, a local retired warrant officer who served with the Canadian Armed Forces for almost 30 years, including conflicts in Afghanistan and Bosnia. Vance, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you.
So how would you describe PTSD and how it impacted you?
Well, I would say PTSD, like post-traumatic stress disorder, is be like an anxiety issue, put it that way. It's something that a person gets from being in a situation that they seem to be deemed upon themselves as a traumatic experience.
Right.
In my case, it was because of the Afghanistan and Bosnia. When I was there, certain things that I've seen and did, kind of against the norm of what we are in Canada, really impacted me, and I brought that home with me.
Can we talk about some of those experiences that you can share with our viewers? Maybe something that particularly really jumps out for you that changed your life?
Yeah, the big thing is what I've seen in some of the places I've been. It's you really can't prepare for it. When you go into we'll call it a war zone for lack of a better term, but when you go into a war zone, you see things, you see death, you see the aftermath of what one human individual can do to another human individual. Right. It's really hard to understand in my mind how certain individuals can do that to another group of individuals. And when you see massive bodies, you see bodies that have been in an explosion or a landmine, or a vehicle hit a landmine, and they're missing all their parts. When you see
like fellow soldiers, for instance?
Fellow soldiers, or
right.
even civilians. Civilians take a lot of the brunt. They're kind of caught in the middle of it all. Mm-hmm. A good example, another one is I did a tour in Cambodia. Cambodia, under the Geneva Convention, you have to when you lay mines down, you have to plot your locations. Mm-hmm. They laid millions of mines in Cambodia, never plotted nothing.
Oh, no.
When we were there, so we had no idea where they were. But when you're out on patrol or doing whatever you have to do, you see a lot of children run around. It could be any age but young, but they're all missing legs or arms or severely scarred from, say, explosion or blast.
They could be out kicking a soccer ball or just playing, right?
It could be anything like that. Where our camp was set up, we had wire fencing set up, and just on the other side of it was a farmer's field, but it was all landmine. He couldn't farm that field because he didn't know what was there, as an example.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's the big thing is you see children, non-combatants that suffer the consequences of the war, and it hits home when you're looking at it and you go, I've got a daughter at home, and it's like, do I want her to go through something? Well, not at all, and so different things like that play on people's minds, eh?
So what are some of the triggers for you with PTSD? Is it sights, smells, sounds?
Yeah, well, For me personally, I can think there's, I'm sure if you looked in the textbook definition, there's all kinds of things they can say to set triggers. But each individual, you can't say, well, a smell will be a trigger. Yeah, it could be one of the triggers. For me, it's a certain smell. For me, it's a crowded situation. When I go with the wife to, say, the mall, I'm okay, but once I get in there, and if it's, say, a Black Friday sale, and all of a sudden it gets packed or shoulder to shoulder, all of a sudden I get real apprehensive.
Really anxious?
Really, like, well, basically the heart kicks into it, it speeds up.
Sure.
I start to sweat. The next thing I know is I'm starting to look for the exits. And what it is because I'm in a situation that I don't have any control of. So the wife is good about that. She knows it, so she'll take me and we'll leave and we'll go out, get some fresh air, and she'll get me out of that situation. Another big one for me is smell. Certain smells will bring back memories that maybe I forgot about or haven't thought about in a long time. And I could point to one of those specifically. It was just after my tour in Afghanistan. We come back, I come home, and I said, I'm back. I want to take my daughter to Disneyland. So, I'm back home and stuff like that. And we were in Disneyland, walking around. We were up at, going by one of the food courts, one of the many ethnic ones. I don't know which one, but there was a certain smell that come across there that hit me, and right away, it was the same thing. Like, I just froze in my tracks. Basically, I went right white. The blood drained from my face. Again, same thing. Started sweating and got into a real panicky mood. And my daughter didn't know what was going on, and we said, we gotta get out of here now. Like,
so if there were lots of crowds plus the smell,
there was the crowds.
That's a double whammy for you, isn't it?
And the smell and the crowds, and so I had to get out of there, go someplace, and regain my thoughts, settle down, and I was there for her, and I didn't want to ruin her. Her day type of deal, eh?
Of course.
So of course, and eventually I got under control. We made it back out, but I had to kind of explain to her what happened and just watch what's going on. So.
And I'm sure she was very understanding.
Of course, yeah. So
let's talk a bit about that transition from military life into civilian life, and how tough it can be at times, especially when you suffer from PTSD.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So like I said, I did 28 years. So I joined when I was 18 when I joined up, and so. Basically, right out of high school, I joined the military. So I really didn't have, another job. And I left to join the military. So that was my job. The things that you do in the military, it's not a normal job. And as a young 18-year-old, you receive specific training. You learn things. You learn tactics. You learn different things. It's not like you're out there. You're, I don't know, doing a teller's job at a...
And it's not all textbooks, it's all hands-on learning experience.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, you got the textbook version of it, so you understand the philosophy of what you're doing, but then you have to actually go out and do those in the field.
What about some of the programs that the government has now that can help you through your PTSD? What are some of the most effective ways of helping you?
The problem I have with the programs, the way it's set up now, I can't talk for people that are in the military now and the treatment that they're receiving and how it works out for them. I've been out for almost 10 years now. All I can talk about my own experience and being here in Lethbridge. There is nothing. They told me there's really nobody here that can that's qualified, if that's the right word, to deal with the issues that I have.
Wow.
I've seen psychiatrists, I've seen psychologists, I've seen cognitive behavioral therapists. That was here in Lethbridge. That was set up on my own through my doctor. That was not done through the military. I contacted the military side of it through Veterans Affairs, asking questions about it. They said they have nothing down in Lethbridge.
You'd have to go to Calgary, maybe?
They said possibly looking at coming to Edmonton.
Edmonton?
Yeah.
That's 5 hours away.
I
on a
realize.
5-hour drive.
Yeah.
So for veterans who don't have programs and access to those programs, do they turn to alcohol?
Well,
I mean, it's, I hate to say it, but.
Well, it's true, though. It's true. The problem we have is, or one of the problems I see, is when somebody wants help. If I call in or somebody else calls in to say make an appointment, say, listen, I'm having problems. They say there's a 24-hour support line you can call in anytime. All right, but that's just call in. That's just getting whatever's off your chest now. But if you need to come in for therapy or you want to come in for counseling, you could be looking at 2 to 3 months before you can even get in to see somebody.
Is that much of a backlog?
There is, and that's just my experience. You know, somebody might say, "Well, I got in a week." That's fine. That's good for you. But under my experiences, that's what's been going on with me. And
so we need help here in Lethbridge. I mean, we have around 2,000 veterans here, and some of those veterans must also be suffering from PTSD.
I'm sure there is. And
so we need help?
We do. We have the Legion. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Legion can and will step in on your behalf, but it follows on the politics side of it. I mean, they can only do so much, like when they're talking, if they make the phone calls for you, they can only do so much however they receive on the other end. Right. So if the other end is a delay or there's a backlog, they're not pushing that agenda through for you, so you're still on the backlog. I belong to, I don't know if I should say it or not, but I belong to a Commandos MC group. That's a Special Forces group. We're all over Canada, but we're through Alberta too. We have a lot of military members in that. Might not know them all, but we all share a similar background.
So you can support each other?
So we support each other. Yeah, yep. Exactly. So we have, we do what we call buddy checks. Every now and then I'll make a few phone calls to some guys I know, okay, they might be having a rough time. I'll just give them a call, say, how's it going?
Almost like an accountability partner.
Yeah.
Having somebody there to support you.
Yeah, and that's just our way of, because I realize that the system is somewhat flawed, and for, you know, he might be in between, say, we can get you in, but your next one might not be for a month. So in between that, what does he do? You know, and so we want to be there for you, and we want him to know, or the other individual to know, that there's always somebody there. You're not alone in this, and we have quite a few. Actually, just on a personal note, just last weekend, we had a guy that was ready to commit suicide. He was going to shoot himself, and we found out, we got a hold of him, we talked him out of that. So now we're dealing with him and trying to bring him along.
When you come across a situation like that, Vance, where somebody feels there's no other way to turn but to take a gun to themselves or to end their own life, how do you approach that situation with that person? What do you say to that person?
Well, there's not really a lot that we have to say. You know, the big thing is we call them up, or we approach them, and we can say, listen, I understand what you're going through.
Because you've been through it yourself.
I've been there. We have others that have been there. It may not be the same situation, but you know, I'm dealing with it myself. And you know, the big thing is let them know that they're not alone, that we are there to listen. Like, you don't even have to talk. Want to go out, just go to Tim Hortons, have a coffee. We'll go for a coffee, just sit there, just to have the company. Like, if you want to talk, fine. If you don't want to talk, that's fine, but I am there, and I will be there as long as it needs to be till you can get through that phase of your life.
What kind of an impact does post-traumatic stress disorder have on relationships? Let's talk a bit about that.
It can be very strenuous. From personal experience and from people I know, a lot of marriages have gone down the tube. The big thing I find with that, and the same thing with me when I come back, is you come back, you're kind of a changed person. You're not the person you are when you left. And so after 6 or 7, 8 months, when you come back, you have a different personality. So you could be more irritable. You could be, say, less loving.
Maybe a shorter fuse, quicker temper?
Oh, definitely,
yeah.
Quicker temper.
Yeah.
You know, you could say, you know, I don't care about nothing. You're just going to lay on the couch or because you just gave up on the world.
So depression sinks in.
Yeah, depression, there we go, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, depression, even anxiety, and if you don't have a strong spouse to help you through this and especially, but the spouse has to understand not so much what you're going through, but has to be able to understand and kind of ride the boat with you and say, okay, listen, you're being irritable, or you're being like my wife as an example. Like we're in the mall. When I start getting to my anxiety attacks and this other stuff, she recognizes it and okay, let's go, and she
sees the symptoms.
She does.
And removes you from the situation.
And she takes me out of that situation. So she's very strong-willed.
It's beautiful.
And she looks after me. And then, but we talk, and she understands. She doesn't understand, and I don't think we've got into depth yet of what I've experienced, but she understands of what I've been through and where I've been.
But that's a strong woman that could do that for you.
Yeah, and you have to have that. And a lot of the problems I see happening is you have spouses that can't deal with the changes. They don't. I don't want to say they don't want to work through it, but they don't want to spend the time and work through it to keep that relationship going and help the individual out in his time of need. And so what happens there is you have a guy come back. He's having a rough go of it. Now he's having family issues. So if the wife packs up the kids and leaves, so now you got an individual that's suffering from PTSD. He just lost his family. Odds are pretty good he's not working yet. So now, what does he turn to? Well, he turns to alcohol, he turns to drugs, or he looks at another way of relieving the pain.
Right.
So, yeah.
Where do you think things will go in the next 10 years when it comes to veterans suffering from PTSD? And what programs are needed from the federal government to help our veterans?
I think the big thing is they need to early recognition of the problem, and it's hard to do. Like it's hard to recognize and bring forth the symptoms and stuff of PTSD because a lot of individuals that are suffering from it don't seek help. Some like for me, for years, I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I was just in a transition phase, coming back from an area of conflict, coming home. So now, okay, I'm just transitioning back into a different lifestyle. It'll go away. The feeling will go away. The truth is, it doesn't. So it would be nice if you could see quicker responses to individuals that require help. More, like we talk about the wait times. So let's if we're having problems with the wait times,
let's address it. Address it.
Yeah, address it.
Yeah.
And so if there is a problem, then let's look at maybe we need to bring in a couple more counselors. We have to work something out, or what can we do? What can we do to help? Vets, but it's other than vets that have PTSD. But what can we do for vets that are returning, that we can get them into counseling now, so that they don't lose their family, they don't turn to drugs and alcohol, they don't get kicked out of the military because of it, they don't have the thoughts of suicide, and so a lot more I think has to be brought forward as awareness to help that situation.
Vance McGrath, local retired Canadian Forces veteran, thanks so much for sharing about your experiences with PTSD and joining us in studio today.
No, thank you.
A private clinic in BC called the Cambie Centre is challenging the constitutionality of the province's healthcare regulations. Now the question is, should the government be able to stop people from spending their own money on a legal service which would solve a health problem or even save their life? Joining me now is Derek Fromm. He's a staff lawyer with the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Derek, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, can you briefly share a bit with our audience some of the background of this case and with an update as to where we stand right now?
Sure. In 2016, the Canadian Constitution Foundation and Cambie Clinics went to court in BC at the Supreme Court, which is the lowest level of court there, and we started litigation against two provisions in BC law. And so what we anticipated as being 26 weeks of court time has now blossomed into 3 years. But there's a longer history. In fact, this litigation goes all the way back to 2009. And since then, the Canby Clinic, the BC government, and other interested parties have been wrangling with these legal matters. And it only came to court in 2016, but just recently, in the last few weeks here, it's been starting to wrap up, and we anticipate that the government will be making their final arguments sometime around Christmas.
So essentially, we have a law that bars patients from paying for necessary medical care, which some see as a violation of their charter rights.
That's correct. So what we're challenging is two provisions in BC law. The first, as you mentioned, is a prohibition on private healthcare insurance. So this is the sort of healthcare insurance that people would be allowed to buy that would cover such things that the government already says it covers. So like a hip replacement, knee surgery, things like that the government system already purportedly covers. In BC law, you cannot buy health insurance for those types of procedures. Now, also, we are challenging a provision that says that doctors must enroll in either the public or the private system. They cannot have a dual practice in one or one and the other at the same time. They must choose between the two. Now, those two things together create a sort of problem in BC. It is not financially possible for doctors to have a purely private practice, and patients cannot afford to pay out of pocket for the sort of medical procedures that they might need.
You know, a lot of people would argue the fact that medical care needs to go to those who need it the most, not to someone who can pay the most. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's exactly right. And we would completely agree with that. And now, part of the thing that we're challenging in BC, one of the laws we're challenging, is the prohibition on private insurance. So currently, when someone who is very wealthy has a problem with their hip or has a heart condition and they are put in a government wait list, what ends up happening is they are able to afford to leave the country and get medical attention immediately. But somebody who does not have that sort of means is forced to wait, languish, and suffer and risk their health and risk death waiting for the medical treatment that they require. And with private insurance, that would go a long way to helping solve that sort of problem of equalizing the medical system and making it more equitable in BC.
You know what's interesting as well, Derek, is over the last 20 years or so, BC premiers have chosen not to enforce the laws prohibiting patients from getting diagnostic tests and surgeries from the private Canby Clinic, and there doesn't seem to be any clear evidence that this has stopped regular people from getting health care?
Well, that's absolutely correct. And in fact, there's many people in BC that are able to queue jump and get right to the front of the list and seek medical care, including at Canby. So for instance, if you're a member of the RCMP, or if you're a member of the armed forces, or you're a federal prisoner, you will get right to the front of the queue and you will get medical treatment right away. But it's those ordinary British Columbia residents, the children, the mothers, retired folks that don't have those sort of connections or that sort of the characteristics that allow them to queue jump like that. They're the ones that end up languishing and suffering and waiting in pain for medically necessary treatments in BC without being able to solve these sorts of problems on their own.
You know, I do understand that some people would feel discriminated against if someone with money, good cold hard cash, they can actually get surgery faster than they can. But how can we deny and justify that someone should continue to suffer if they're able to afford faster treatment?
Well, I don't think we should be forcing them to suffer, and that really is the crux of the case. See, this case is all about legalizing healthcare. No mother, no child, no retired person, no one in BC should be forced to wait on a healthcare wait list while their health deteriorates, they're risking their health, they're risking their death, waiting for medically necessary treatment in a BC public healthcare facility. And if this is something that the BC government simply can't provide to people in a fair and equitable fashion, in a timely fashion, then it must get out of the way. It must get out of the way so that patients and doctors can work together to solve these problems in a timely and fair fashion. Now, simply put, again, to reiterate this case is all about legalizing healthcare in BC, allowing patients and doctors to solve problems together. And if the government won't do this for BC residents, it's violating some of the most important constitutional rights that define us as Canadians, namely Section 7 of the Charter, those rights including life, liberty, and security of the person. And with those at risk, the BC government, I think, is risking a lot in court with us, and hopefully we have a good decision when the decision comes out.
Derek, is it true that Canadian doctors can in fact open a private clinic as long as they're not part of the public healthcare system?
Now, Canada, the legislation throughout Canada is provincial. So Canada is a patchwork. Now, here in this province of Alberta, it's not the case, is my understanding. You have to, if you're going to open a surgical facility, it has to be government inspected and effectively government owned. In BC, that's not the case. Now, in Saskatchewan, things are different. And again, in other places across the country, like Newfoundland doesn't have any sorts of these restrictions. And in Quebec doesn't have any ban on private insurance. Saskatchewan doesn't have a ban on private insurance. So you really have to look province by province. But the fact is, in BC, private healthcare is perfectly legal. There is a dual practice, there's I guess, two-tiered medicine in BC. That's the way it works. But the problem, again, is that patients can't buy insurance, so they have to pay out of pocket for all the expenses of the medical care they receive. And at the same time, doctors must either be in the public or the private system. They can't be in both. And so those two things together effectively create these long waiting lists in BC. And that's problematic because government actually does ration care. So there's much evidence of this at trial. And one good example is bariatric surgery. So bariatric surgery, the wait lists in BC in a number of years ago were around 500 people waiting on an annual basis for bariatric surgery. And the government capped surgical procedures at 50 per year, which meant that if you were number 51 on the list, you were waiting until next year. If you were number 300 on the list, you were waiting for years. Now, what happens is when you're waiting for surgery, you're in pain. It might be knee surgery or hip surgery. You might miss the best period of your children's lives. You might not be able to play with them because of your health condition. You might be risking further problems with your health, like one of our clients in the Canby case who suffered irreparable spinal damage and became paralyzed. Or you could risk death, as another one of our patients who fortunately did not die, but she was able to seek timely medical services through a private facility in BC. So these are real problems. There are real people that are suffering and in pain in BC on these waiting lists. And as a famous Canadian case said, the Shuley decision out of Quebec over 10 years ago said, access to a waiting list is not access to health care. And it's a very important distinction. Just because the government has surgical facilities and can do the surgical procedures for you in their facility doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it in a timely and effective way that will preserve your health. And if your health is at risk and you're suffering, it becomes a constitutional violation when the government doesn't allow you to solve your own medical problems.
Like you mentioned earlier as well, not allowing a combination of private and public health care, many Canadians are going to say, we don't want to be like the United States, right? Two-tiered healthcare system. But if we're talking about a similar system to what countries like Germany, Sweden, and the UK are using, why are we opposed to something that has a great track record?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm never really sure why we always compare ourselves to the U.S. other than they're geographically close to us. It seems to be somewhat of a bogeyman. And I would like to see us compare ourselves more to France or the UK, Sweden, the European countries that actually have been functioning very well with a public and a private system in tandem. We shouldn't just be stuck into this mindset that we just have one healthcare system for all. We all have to be in it. And in my opinion, that's what's led to our poor results when you see our healthcare system ranked in the OECD studies. We're always near the bottom of the OECD countries in ranking of healthcare outcomes. And I believe that's at least partially because we haven't allowed doctors and patients to come together to solve problems. And if the government would simply get out of the way in cases like this, patients would be able to work with their doctors and develop solutions to the medical issues that they're facing.
I understand that the Nurses Union argues that private health care causes doctors to double bill. Is that true?
Well, that is actually a subject of some consternation because in BC, what they define double billing as is something very different from what it sounds like it should be. Now, when I say double billing to one of my friends on the street, they would think, well, the doctor is billing the government and billing the patient simultaneously. But BC law doesn't necessarily view it that way. The BC law views it as if you bill the patient for it, and you could have billed the government, regardless of if you do or not, that is double billing. And so that is a matter of some interpretation, let's put it that way. And in fact, that's what started this Cambie litigation off in the first place, because way back in 2009, the nurses union in BC actually sued the government of BC, saying, look, there's private facilities in this province that are double billing. Now, it was never proved in court what that was or what definition should be used, but when Cambie then became implicated by this lawsuit against the BC government, Dr. Brian Day, the owner of Cambie, then turned around and had to start his constitutional challenge to maintain his clinic, because what was going to happen is potentially he could be shut down. So that was really the start of this litigation back in 2009. And so whether or not that's true hasn't been proven in court, and I don't really know what to say about that at this point.
Now, is it true that BC actually places a cap on the number of surgeries that can be done? And if so, why? Would that not limit the ability to make use of available facilities and doctors?
Absolutely. And every province does this. This is like how sausage is made in the healthcare system. When at the beginning of the year, governments have a budget and they say we're able to spend X number of dollars on healthcare. And then as it goes through the process of deciding how that money is to be spent, what ends up happening is certain numbers of procedures are determined to be affordable under that budget. And so when I talked about bariatric surgery before, that's a perfect example. There's 50 bariatric procedures that were able to be done in BC in, I'm going to say 2015, I think that was the date. And before that, it was a higher number, but budgetary restrictions came in and it was reduced to 15. And so what happens to those surgical facilities when the budgets are reduced? Well, they sit empty. Doctors might twiddle their thumbs. They're looking for work. And the fact is that the facilities are there, the people are there to perform it, but the money isn't. And that's the government's budgetary decisions that are rationing, are saying upfront how many procedures can be performed per year. And that happens across the country. And in this case, when we're talking about BC, it's the BC facts that are important. And in BC, yes, that absolutely does happen. And so what ends up happening is that creates waiting lists. And so if you're on the list, but you're not scheduled to be done this year because there's not enough money in the government's budget, then you have to wait till next year or the following year to get your procedure. Meanwhile, you're in pain, you're watching your health deteriorate, and you're maybe even risking death. And this is a problem because you're not allowed to buy private insurance in BC. You cannot jump the queue, as it were, and get private insurance and go to a private facility. You would have to pay completely 100% out of pocket. And in our opinion, that's not fair. That's not equitable. That punishes people who don't have the means to do that.
Derek, some people say the government should make it illegal to travel to another country for surgery, even life-saving surgery. Just get in line with everybody else. How do you respond to that?
Well, that would just make the problems that we're having worse, wouldn't it? Now, everyone has to suffer. It's just a fact of life. There's only so much money that can be put into private healthcare. The government either will have to tax us a lot more, or will have to find enormous efficiencies in the system to get rid of the wait lists. It's funny. There's a study released by C.D. Howe a number of years ago that kind of showed what's on the horizon for Canada as our population ages, as healthcare becomes more expensive. Already in provinces like BC, Alberta included, healthcare is right around the 50% of the provincial budget. And that is slated to increase enormously in coming years. This is a wall of reality that we're coming up against. We simply cannot afford to keep things functioning the way they are now. We need to find new ways to deliver healthcare. We need to find efficiencies. And one of the best ways to do that is to allow patients and doctors to come together to solve problems on their own. Allow people to buy private insurance. Come up with new ways of allowing doctors to practice in public and private simultaneously. It could be as simple as saying, if you want to perform surgeries in the private sector, you have to put in 50 surgeries in the public sector. It could be something simple like that. We just need to unleash this, unleash the market on this, because right now people are suffering and dying. And as the Supreme Court said in Truly, access to a wait list is not access to healthcare. It can't be more clear than that.
Derek Fromm, staff lawyer with the Canadian Constitutional Foundation, thanks a lot for joining me today from Chestermere Lake, Alberta.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.